Every morning, you murder a message, an intimate letter written specifically for you, by you, in the depths of the night, and you throw it away like trash. You think dreaming is a waste of time, that those confusing images, those impossible scenarios, those conversations with the dead are just neural noise, mental debris, a programming error from a tired brain processing useless information. You're wrong, dead wrong, and this ignorance is costing you your very soul. Right now, while you live awake, believing you control your life, there's an entire ocean beneath you, a deep and mysterious sea that determines every choice you make, every emotion you feel, every pattern you repeat. You're nothing but a ship drifting on the surface, thinking you know the waters because you see the waves. But the currents that actually move you, those you don't even suspect exist, invisible forces dragging your destiny while you focus on adjusting the sails, emotional tides dictating your reactions while you believe you're deciding rationally. Your dreams are the only map of that submerged territory, the only language that ocean speaks, and you, every single day, choose to be deaf. The result? You live like a stranger in your own life, like a tourist, lost in your own inner territory, repeating the same mistakes without understanding the pattern, sabotaging the same relationships without seeing the connection, running from the same shadows without recognizing they're chasing you from within, never understanding why your life feels like a movie where someone else wrote the script, because you rejected the only guide that could show you the way back home, the only compass that points to your true north. Your dreams aren't just dreams. They're emergency messages from your unconscious, love letters from your own soul, secret codes containing the answers you've been searching for in all the wrong places. You live in an age of absolute disconnection, an era where humanity severed its roots with mystery and decided that only what can be measured, weighed, and proven exists. You've turned your psyche into a machine and your dreams into a software bug, a glitch that must be ignored for the system to function properly. Think about it. You spend 1/3 of your life dreaming. 1/3. If you live 70 years, that's over 20 years immersed in this altered state of consciousness. 20 years of intense experiences, loaded with symbolism, emotion, and meaning. 20 years of conversations with your deepest self, and you treat it like it's nothing. You care more about your bank account than your dream life. You pay more attention to your social media feed than to the images your own psyche produces every night. It's like having an oil well in your backyard and using it to light a campfire, like owning an ancestral treasure and trading it for scrap metal. But the tragedy doesn't stop there, because when you reject your dreams, you're not just losing information. You're losing your capacity for psychic self-regulation. You're cutting the thread that connects your limited consciousness to the ancient wisdom of your unconscious. You're closing the most important communication channel of your existence. You know that feeling of being lost, of not knowing who you really are, of feeling like you're living someone else's life, that sensation of waking up each day playing a role you didn't choose, of acting according to a script someone else wrote for you. That's not modern existential anxiety. It's a symptom of disconnection. You've become a ship without anchor, a navigator without compass, floating on a sea you refuse to know, a stranger in your own inner territory. And the most ironic part? You seek self-knowledge in all the wrong places, in self-help books that promise ready-made formulas, in therapies that focus only on conscious behavior, in philosophies that ignore the depth of the human psyche, from gurus who sell you maps of territories they've never explored. It's like trying to understand the ocean by studying only raindrops, like wanting to know a mountain by looking only at the stones on the path. You want to know yourself? The answer is under your pillow, every night, waiting with the patience of centuries, but you prefer to remain a stranger in your own inner territory. You prefer the familiar comfort of the surface, even though it's slowly drowning you. Here comes the part that's going to hurt, because the problem isn't just that you ignore your dreams. The problem is what's happening to you while you ignore them. You're becoming a shallow person, not by choice, but by necessity. When you cut off access to your unconscious, your conscious personality has to compensate, and it compensates by becoming rigid, controlling, defensive. Like a general who's lost contact with headquarters and now has to improvise strategies without intel. You develop a hard shell to protect a center that's becoming increasingly hollow. an emotional armor that shields you from everything, including yourself. Look at your life. Really look at it with brutal honesty. How many times do you act in ways you don't even understand? How many times do you explode for no apparent reason? How many times do you sabotage yourself just when things are going well? How many times do you repeat destructive patterns even knowing they're destructive? This isn't lack of willpower. This isn't character weakness. It's your unconscious trying to get your attention. It's the deep currents of the sea trying to communicate with the ship on the surface. Smoke signals from the depths. But you, focused only on what you can see, interpret these movements as storms, as problems to solve, as flaws to fix, as enemies to defeat. So what do? You try to control more. You push harder. You create more rules, more disciplines, more conscious strategies. You build more walls, more defenses, more security systems. It's like trying to calm the ocean by yelling at it, like asking a hurricane for silence. The sea doesn't care about your shouting. It has its own laws, its own rhythms, its own messages that transcend your tiny conscious logic. Meanwhile, every day that passes, the distance between who you think you are and who you really are grows wider, like two continents slowly drifting apart. You become an actor playing a role you didn't even write, a role based on external expectations, internal fears, and a limited understanding of your own nature. A character built by fear and maintained by ignorance. And the worst part? You don't even realize it. Because being disconnected from the unconscious is being disconnected from your ability to perceive that disconnection. It's like being inside a bubble and not being able to see the bubble. Like being a prisoner in a jail where you're both the guard and the inmate. Result, you live exhausted, constantly drained, fighting forces you don't understand, resisting impulses you don't recognize, trying to be someone you maybe never should have been, spending precious energy on wars you don't need to fight. And all of this because you decided that the letters you receive every night aren't worth reading, because you chose to be deaf to the only language your soul truly speaks. There's a man who dedicated his entire life to diving into that ocean you reject, Carl Gustav Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist who had the courage to admit that human consciousness is just the tip of a gigantic iceberg, that most of who we are remains submerged, hidden, operating through symbols and images. Jung wasn't some delusional mystic. He was a rigorous scientist who stumbled upon an inconvenient truth. Pure rationality is insufficient to understand the human psyche. That there's an older and wiser intelligence operating through dreams, an intelligence he called psychic self-regulation. For Jung, your dreams aren't random products of a resting brain. They're letters sent from the deep sea of the unconscious, precise messages about the state of your psychic navigation, warnings about approaching storms, indications of submerged treasures, maps to unexplored territories of your own soul. Imagine for a moment that Jung was right, that there's an instinctive wisdom operating through your dreams, a wisdom that knows you better than you know yourself, that sees patterns you don't see, that anticipates problems you don't anticipate, that offers solutions your conscious mind would never find. This wisdom doesn't speak the language of logic. It speaks through symbols, metaphors, narratives that seem nonsensical. It's like the unconscious is a poet trying to communicate with an accountant. The accountant wants clear numbers, defined categories, linear explanations. The poet offers images, paradoxes, truths that can only be felt. Jung discovered that when you learn to read this symbolic language, when you stop demanding that your dreams make rational sense and start feeling what they're pointing toward, something extraordinary happens. You regain access to your own integral intelligence. You stop being just a drifting ship and become a conscious navigator. The process Jung called individuation is exactly that, the journey of reconnection between limited consciousness and unlimited unconscious wisdom. It's the passage from a fragmented life to an integrated one, from a defensive personality to an authentic one. But Jung went further. He discovered that the unconscious doesn't just speak to you through personal dreams. It also connects you to something vaster, the collective unconscious. Those ancestral images that appear in your dreams aren't just yours. They belong to all humanity. They're maps of the human soul carved into the deepest parts of your psyche. And when you reconnect with that source, You don't just know yourself, you recognize yourself as part of something infinitely larger. This approach resonates deeply with thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, who sought wisdom in the depths of self-examination, or modern voices like Jordan Peterson, who bridge ancient wisdom with contemporary psychology. Like them, Jung offers a path to authenticity, not through surface-level fixes, but through integration of all dimensions of being. An approach that demands both intellectual rigor and existential courage. The map for that journey, it's in your dreams, every night, waiting for you to stop running from depth and start diving into it. Jung spent decades studying his own dreams, his patients' dreams, the myths and symbols of every culture, and his conclusion was radical. Healing doesn't come from outside. It comes from reconnecting with the wisdom that already lives within you. Here's the truth no one tells you. You don't need more information about how to live. You need access to the intelligence that already lives within you. You don't need more conscious strategies. You need an alliance with unconscious wisdom. You don't need more books, more courses, more techniques. You need to reconnect with the source that never stops speaking to you. The source that whispers every night while you sleep. Imagine waking up tomorrow, not as a stranger in your own life, but as someone who finally understands the currents that move them. Imagine making decisions not based solely on what seems logical, but on what resonates with your integral nature. Imagine living not as an actor playing a role, but as the author of your own story, as the conscious captain of your own ship, navigating in alliance with the forces of the deep ocean. This isn't fantasy. This is real possibility, but it demands courage. The courage to admit you don't know everything about yourself. The courage to dive into waters you don't control. The courage to listen to voices that speak in a language you don't yet fully master. The courage to trust an intelligence that transcends your small rational mind. Start tonight. When you go to bed, make a simple request to the deep sea of your unconscious. Show me what I need to see. Leave a notebook beside your bed. When you wake up, before grabbing your phone, before thinking about anything practical, write down everything you can remember from the dream. It doesn't matter if it seems nonsensical. It doesn't matter if it's fragmented. It doesn't matter if it's disturbing or strange. Write it down. Do this for 1 week, just 1 week. Then read everything you wrote. Look for patterns, symbols that repeat, emotions that thread through the dreams, characters that appear again and again. Don't try to interpret rationally. Just observe, feel. Allow the images to speak to you the way they want to speak, like you're an archaeologist unearthing treasures from your own soul. You're going to discover there's a voice beyond your conscious voice, a perspective beyond your limited perspective, an intelligence that sees connections you don't see, that anticipates problems you don't anticipate, that offers solutions that would never occur to you, and that intelligence wants to help you. It always has. You're the one who refused to listen. Individuation isn't a destination. It's a process, an ongoing dialogue between who you think you are and who you can truly become. And your dreams are the language of that dialogue. They're the bridge between two worlds, the limited world of your consciousness and the unlimited world of your unconscious potential. A bridge that's always been there, waiting for you to have the courage to cross it. Jung spent decades documenting this process, not just in his clinical work, but in his own life. He too was a drifting ship, until he learned to read the maps he received each night. His dreams guided him through personal crises, professional decisions, and discoveries that would forever change our understanding of the human psyche. This journey of inner exploration echoes what great minds throughout history have undertaken, from the Stoics' practice of self-examination to modern depth psychology's quest for wholeness. And if it worked for him, if it worked for thousands of his patients, if it works for anyone who has the courage to dive into the depths, then it can work for you. Maybe the emptiness you feel isn't a flaw. Maybe it's a calling to reconnect with parts of yourself you'd abandoned, a calling to reclaim your psychic integrity, a calling to become who you really are, not who you think you should be. The ocean of the unconscious is there, beneath you, right now, sending waves, creating currents, whispering secrets through your dreams. The only question is, will you keep being deaf, or will you finally learn the language of the depths? Here's my final question for you. How many years will you spend ignoring the letters you receive every night? How many years will you waste floating on the surface when you could be exploring the depths? How many lives will you live as a stranger in your own territory before you have the courage to come home? You have two choices. You can keep living like a drifting ship, believing you know the sea because you see the waves. You can stay deaf to the language your soul speaks every night. You can maintain that hard shell protecting an increasingly hollow center. You can keep being an actor in a play someone else wrote. It's the safe option, the familiar option, the option that keeps you on the surface, even though it's slowly drowning you. Or you can have the courage to drop anchor in the depths and discover what forces truly govern your navigation. You can decide that enough is enough, that you're tired of living like a stranger in your own life, that you no longer want to repeat the same patterns, sabotage the same opportunities, run from the same shadows without understanding why. The ocean of the unconscious isn't going anywhere. It's there, beneath you, right now, sending waves, creating currents, whispering secrets through your dreams. The same currents that have moved humanity for millennia. The same wisdom that guided our ancestors when they still knew how to listen to the voice of the deep. The same intelligence Jung rediscovered and that transformed his life forever. The question isn't whether the ocean exists. The question is whether you'll keep being deaf or finally learn the language of depth. Whether you'll keep living on the surface or have the courage to dive into who you really are. Whether you'll remain a ship without direction or become the conscious navigator of your own existence. Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is being who you really are. But you can only be who you really are if you know who you really are. And you can only know who you really are if you stop running from the submerged parts of yourself, if you stop treating your dreams like garbage and start treating them like the treasures they truly are. Your dreams are the treasure map. The unconscious ocean is the territory. Your courage is the only equipment needed. The journey home begins tonight. When you close your eyes and, for the first time, instead of running from dreams, you decide to dive into them. When you have the courage to listen to what your soul has been trying to tell you all along. The deep sea is calling your name, and maybe you're finally ready to answer. Maybe tonight will be the night you stop being a stranger in your own life and begin the journey back to who you really are. The most important journey you'll ever take, the journey to yourself. Comment, I dive into the depths within. If you made it this far, if these words touch something real inside you, then the sea has already begun calling your name. And maybe, finally, you're ready to answer the call of your own soul.